Hello everyone, today we're doing a shitty Armored Core tier list. I honestly haven't done one of these yet because I feel that no one actually cares about them, but YouTube voted for it, so let's go. Just gonna do it real quick, I have lunch break at work, figured I'd get it done. So, for anyone who's going to rage in the comments, because everyone does because it's a shitty tier list, please at least watch the entire video. So first we're gonna start with Armored Core 1. Obviously, the control scheme for most people trying to get into it's bad, but you have to remember there were no analog sticks for games, so the controls once you learn them are quite nice. While I think we'll all agree the last level was horribly misplaced, it was because overall there was no other platforming in the game. If they eased you into it better, it probably would have been fine. But for what it was at the time, we're going to give it an A. As for the sequel of Project Phantasma, not much to say. Much shorter game. Tried to add a weird boss with Stinger who it's just odd that we keep letting him live. It was really just a test for the arena function, which worked. As for MOA, great last boss. Plot's good. They actually balance the arena into the plot. Game is great. While the AI is a bit cheesy, it works for what it has. And I'm going to put that in a solid S. Armored Core 2. Again, great game. Added overboost into it. Unfortunately, just like the first Armored Core 2 as well as 3 heavily reduces the AP for ACs inside missions. It also didn't utilize the analog sticks, which it could have, but technically once you learn it, it's actually better without analog. I see it's harder for people to learn it, though otherwise. But still, the fact that the last fight has so many things to it, so many patterns, changes phases based on health, changes based on what weapon you're using, the fact that it dies so fast to anything that's shell, like every disorder unit, unfortunately drops it to A. Another Age, while great, has a lot of missions. It suffers from having too many missions. The game very quickly drags on. A lot of missions are just huge with weak spamming enemies that don't hurt you. If they cut out like half of the lower end just enemy spam missions, it would also place as A or maybe S. Has a great ending, but it's going to be a B because there's too many long, boring missions you don't need. I get that it was meant to bridge a gap to give that Armored Core play while you're waiting for 3, but the fact that you have to do every mission before being able to actually beat it, opposed to other games where you could go back and free play later, I think is where it suffers because there's just too many. Now for Armored Core 3, same thing for the base games. Great game, fit the mechanics in well, plot is good. For the third base game in a row, the ending mission leaves much to be desired. There's some pretty shit ACs, a weird early platforming section. They heal you after, so there's no point for even having it. The weird elevator ride you can skip by waiting at the top after jumping on the elevator, and then the controller fight at the end. I don't know what they were going for. Story-wise, it's good. Difficulty, it's kind of odd. Phantasm and Nocturne in the factory, as well as the Magna Ruins, if you don't know what to do to cheese it or don't know it's coming, kind of difficult. The rest of it's eh. Silent Line, great game. They added a good expanse of arm weapons, a nice variety of levels. The way they did the hidden parts from a completionist standpoint sucks, but it's great because just like 3 that also added in a ranking system that I forgot to mention, it's not meta dependent. You can do anything, almost any build, and still S rank missions based on how you played. So while the hidden parts are kind of weird that there's so many, and there's very arbitrary requirements on some you may not figure out without a freaking wiki open, it's still great. You'll still randomly find a bunch of them playing through, and most of them are so that it doesn't really penalize you for not finding them. But for someone who wants a lot of gameplay, this is the second part for that string. there's something to keep working towards, even towards missions you've already beaten. Now, next up is Armored Core Nexus. As we know, Nexus, they tried to revamp a bunch of stuff, more tactical gameplay, a lot less airtime, went too far on the heat, adding magazines to machine guns and belt-fed chain guns, completely destroying the weapons from being used while they were too strong before. Nexus gets a D. Now, if we're counting the second disc of Nexus, the Nexus second disc would get a respectable in between C and B or C+, just because the plot that they give you, the rework and extra back plot for the first gen games, especially if you've never played them, is great. The missions are nice. The missions in base Nexus are also shit. A lot of them are just show up, kill 5 things, you're done. A lot of them in the same damn map over and over again. About halfway through is when they throw in the night vision tutorials that are either fight 3 chicken walker MTs in a dark arena room, or shoot a helicopter once. Now, Armored Core 9breaker gets a lot of flack because it's not really a game, it's a training sim. But what it does do is that it lets you try out weapons, you get a lot of unique agility trials and other things that let you really try out the parts and try out different things in just scenarios that you'll never use. While people say it's a good training thing for Last Raven because it's so hard, the game doesn't play the same. It's not as helpful as it seems, but what it does do is that it teaches you at least the general idea of how certain parts work, teaches you about missile dodging that is possible while you have to learn it different for different games, teaches the agility, different movement ideas. It really hones your skills that carry over to every game from AC1 to Last Raven without directly applying. If you go through it and then go back to older games, you will notice you'll have a much better grasp just of that game. Unless you're relying heavily for the analog controls, then it teaches you theory without actual practice, which is the other issue there. But I'm still going to give it a solid B, because like Project Phantasma, the main bulk of it for most people is the arena being there, a ton of randomly generized enemies, you can sort by a bunch of stuff. It's really just here's every part, do a bunch of arenas, the game is great, you don't even need it to do the like training portions, but the training portions are still also fun. It's something different, a lighthearted thing to get away to just play it without having to go through the plot or difficult missions. Now, I personally love playing Formula Front. I have the speedrun record for the PSP international game. Overall, the game is great. There's no real unlocks. Unfortunately, a lot of the stats and everything for the AI does not make a lot of sense. The first 15 seconds of the first chip for 30 seconds is completely ignored. If it functioned better like it said or had a better explanation, I would say it's a lot better. But it's very nice for making a fantasy AC like an overboost parry blade puncher that you yourself couldn't normally play. Anyone, once they learn it, can get into it, even if they can't play Armored Core, because they don't have to do the actual piloting for on their own. And for the PS2 versions, you can do 5v5 team setups by just setting up teams, loading them, and fighting each other. It's honestly fun, like a fun thing to watch. I would give it a B. I'm not giving it an A because you can control it manually, but there's a purposeful input delay as if you're using a wireless controller. And just for overall, while it's fun, it doesn't last as long as I would hope for the fun part of it. Now for Armored Core Last Raven, which is next. Personally, I think this is the best game in the series. The game has a lot of different endings. The runs are short, a lot of parts, a lot of stuff to do. The game is very challenging. But where I also understand is that unlike me, who loves a challenge and ramming my face into a wall until I get it, analyzing the AI until I learn how it works to play great, that is not for most people. And because of that is why I'm also dropping it to an A. Because again, while I feel that it is the best because that is the kind of game that I like. I understand it's not for most people, especially if you pick this up as your first one. The difficulty scaling options of not knowing the different endings and everything, of having Bolt in the distribution center at the start is fucking stupid. Now for Armored Core 4. I personally played the most of 4th gen Armored Core. As we can all tell, this is where it breaks off from the actual regular formula. They're trying something different. Try to get a bit more high octane play, having like the dodge button in there for quick boost without iframes. But the base 1.0 release of Armored Core 4, it's clear the primal armor doesn't work. The tutorial overboost doesn't fucking work because you have no KP output. And the first patch gave you like 10 times increase on it, which kept going up all the way to 1.6, which by the way, the anywhere but Japan for PS3 didn't even get patch 1.5 or 1.6. It stopped at 1.4. It kept going on Xbox, which is thankfully the version I had. But like the game doesn't even function well on PlayStation 3. Because, again, they just did a really shit job of it. It was really a... As I hate to say people doing this, this was really a test of what they could do, and unfortunately it was too much of a test like that. But where it shines is while the gameplay isn't necessarily great, the story is great, the story presentation is great, and the mission briefings are fan-freaking-tastic. They're immaculate. They're a cut above everything else we've had for in the series, especially with how Nexus really had terrible mission briefings. They gutted the entire concept of a briefing, and Last Raven brought it back, but not nearly enough. And even 4A, just peak mission briefings. There's no generation that is better for them. But because of the issues, if we're going based on the base 1.0 release of the game, it gets a B. It gets an A with 1.6, not for necessarily the gameplay, but how well it did the story above the rest. Now, Armored Core for Answer is my favorite game for the entire franchise. It's not the best, but it is my favorite game. I played the most out of it. The PS3, I have the speedrun record for every category. Thousands of hours on it. Played it online for 3 years straight. Game is great. But it is freaking heavily flawed as hell. The netcode online is shit, so that immediately brings the netcode down for most people to not fun. The 1.0, the freaking base release, a lot of weapons are broken as shit. The following one, 1.1, they tried slowing it down. Ruined the balance, movement's fucking awful. 1.2 is way too fucking fast, and 1.15 with way too fucking fast on infinite energy is just a freaking clown circus. So 1.3 for PvP balance is great, but they didn't balance the enemies in single player, immediately bringing... Like, a ton of them are overweight, it doesn't work, and 1.4 made that even worse. Just the whole fact of this game and 4, that a 4v1 or 2v5 is even possible, even with just bringing 4 fucking handguns, is not in a test of skill. It's a freaking test. It's a freaking a test of the AI is fucking awful. They did terrible job with the freaking AI. A lot of the story missions are great, but nothing in the game moves. Rockets are broken as hell because nothing moves and everything's a damage sponge or immediately dies. It goes way too into Japanese fantasy mecha. So while it is personally my favorite, it's getting a C. Like, in between a B and a C, but a C because it's just not Armored Core, and it's so flawed between the netcode, the balance patches, and everything else. They don't know what the fuck they were doing. Now, clearly the person who made this list on the tier maker really loves Armored Core 5, because it's actually on here twice. Armored Core 5 took a complete breakaway from the entire series. There is no flying. They added a third weapon damage type, and then tied the defensive values to weight class, making no fucking sense that now a lightweight stick can just go at max speed through machine gun and missile fire and all this other shit, taking no damage, while then a machine gun completely shreds a fucking tank to pieces. or one-shot them with howitzers that a lightweight can boost through. And then on the same side, the lightweight immediately dies from thermal heat when it has a small surface area, while a tank that should have all the weight for cooling and everything, or just the fact that it's a giant thing that can't dodge and the heat's just consistently hitting it, just does fucking nothing. And then there's a weird chemical thing in the mix for midweight. It just doesn't fucking make sense. So because of that, the story missions are way too long. The extra Zodiac bosses are tied to getting every objective to, or certain key objectives in a certain period of time that basically makes it so every mission needs a certain meta setup away from the old S ranks and everything where everything works if you're good enough at it too. You need to figure out the exact build to get it done. They made it so long you pay for restocks mid-mission. It's just, I understand what they were getting. They were going towards more for the online tactical approach of having a long-lasting team-based thing, but it feels like they took the Chroma Hounds dev, which they did, and instead of doing Chroma Hounds 2, gave them Armored Core 5, and he tried to merge it. So I'm not only putting this in D tier once, I'm putting it in D tier twice. Now, as for Verdict Day fixed a lot of the gripes I had with balancing for defensive types. They shortened a lot of the long missions, but it kind of suffers from the same thing that Armored Core 2 Another Age does with all of the order missions. There's 100 missions in the game, but 70 to 80 plus of them are just show up, blow up 6 fucking things, and you're done. There's a second plot line in the order missions for both 5 and Verdict Day. And the whole focus again was the online territory control. So while I would say that just like 5, I hate 5th gen. I never want to play them again. I have to admit that Verdict Day is still the second solid S plus tier game. I fucking hate the game, hate the entirety of how it plays, but it did what it set out to do. It is an online territory-based, team-based game that needs actual cooperation with your team. The last boss of 5 was just fucking bullshit, not dodgeable attacks, but you one-shot it with an actual howitzer. There's a UNAC system for Verdict Day. The final fight, while still is more of an RPG strategy fight if you have to figure out how it works, is still quite fine. It's a very fair fight. Albeit you have to figure it out. It's still a few hours of actually working it out, which you really shouldn't need for an Armored Core game, which is another gripe of mine. Once you get it down, it's fine. Just like Last Raven. It's hard, but once you figure it out, it's great. I just fucking hate the game. Still solid S plus tier. Second best rated game in the franchise, even though I freaking hate it. Now, please give me all of the hate you want for if I whatever said about your game or anything in the comments. Post it anywhere you want. I'll have conversations with people. I don't care. I'm just going to point out that this tier list for me is not how I feel about the games. It's what I feel they should actually get as being an actual rating. Thank you, everyone. My lunch break is basically over. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.